Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we're up in New England, in Connecticut, with a runner who had a college career at my school, IUP. We didn't quite cross paths on the same team at the same time, but he left his name on the record books there, had a very successful business career around the world. And since all that ended, has done some thinking and recently become an author. All kind of interesting stuff. Welcome today on the podcast, Dan Friedrich.
Hi, Matt. So good to see you.
Let's talk about your origin story as a competitive athlete and a runner. How did you first get involved in any of that?
Wow, this is all about the 70s. So I actually started long distance running in April, May of 1970. Like a lot of runners at that time period, we were all failures at all the other sports. I sat on the bench in basketball, baseball, and football. I was too small, not fast enough. But then I tried to do high hurdling, which led me eventually in college to the steeplechase, but I was no good at it. I couldn't get 3 steps. I wasn't fast enough and I wasn't flexible enough. I could, however, do 4 steps so I could switch legs. But what happened to me was I pulled my hamstring, and the coach at the time, and I couldn't kick up over the hurdles. So the coach at the time said, "Why don't you train with the distance runners?" And I said, "Fine, I'll do that." And I started running with them. So I went from no training at distance to 0 to full on. And funny story, one of the interval workouts, I'm coming around the bend and I'm giving it everything I can. Both legs cramp up and I end up in the infield on the grass just because it just gave out. I was pushing too hard. But how I got into the long distance that I ended up, there was a 4 school meet and I was going to run the mile because I just started. On the way home from practice, the coach says, "Oh, you know what? I can only run 2 guys or 3 guys in the mile and you're not there yet because you just started." And the one guy that was running the 2 mile said, "I'm the only one running the 2 mile." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll do that." I don't know anything. I don't know how hard that is. So I end up running the 2 mile in this meet and I place. I get a point for the school. I run 10:40 the first 2 mile I ever ran, got a point, and we won the meet by 1 point.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So that started my long distance career. And that was at the end of my sophomore year in 1970. So that's how I got into it. And then I just kept training from there.
What school were you in? What was the town size? And what was the facilities and the shoes and anything you remember about that?
This was in Bethel Park. So this is in Western Pennsylvania. It's in the South Hills area of Pittsburgh. And the school was huge. I graduated just in my class, somewhere in the 800 number. So there were just a lot of kids in this school, a lot of competition. The facilities, the track was cinder. Actually, was a decent track for a high school. The shoes were terrible. Back then, the technology just wasn't there yet. Running was brand new. So the shoes were, we used to call them like erasers with cloth on the top. They weren't very good. And the shoes that you ran in races that had the spikes on them, they were like cardboard with paper around them. You'd finish the race and your feet were on fire because it was just so hot. So that was pretty crazy. But you have to remember that time period, running wasn't a thing yet, really. When I used to run out on the roads, and I think you had some other runners say this too, but people used to throw stuff at you. I'd run in South Park and people throw cans at you and say, "Get off the road. Why are you in here? And why are you running in your underwear on the highway?" And it sort of shows you that back then, the intolerance for it. Now it's so accepted. But there's a life lesson there about tolerance, of course, because people didn't have it until Then they got into it and then it became a craze. But that happened later on in the 70s, towards the end, really, where it
Yeah,
got so popular.
yeah, that definitely happened to me a lot in Johnstown. And I'm always wondering, was it a Pennsylvania thing? Was it a Western Pennsylvania thing? Because not everybody had it, but boy, it was all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the impact of getting that point, the reaction of your coach and your coach. You mentioned that you did intervals in your sophomore year. So coach sounded like they knew something about running. What was your coach like? And what happened to you after you scored a point? When did you start thinking about yourself as a runner?
Okay. I don't know that I ever thought as a runner. I actually just wanted to make a difference and do and excel at something. I was tired of sitting on the bench of other sports. I just wanted to play and count. So, and I gave it everything. The initial coach that gave me that opportunity, he was my uncle. His name was Joe Lodge, and he actually was a very successful coach in track and field. He had some very talented runners. One of them was Shirko's. They both went on to run for University of Pittsburgh and did quite well. They're very talented. Broke 150 in the 800, were down in the low fours in the mile type of runners. So my uncle was the one that gave me that opportunity, and he was a good coach. But I only had him for that season because my aunt said he was coaching both track and field, cross country, and wrestling. And she said, enough, you're not home. So he gave up. Since he had been a wrestler in college, he went with the wrestling and gave up the track and field and the cross country. So then I had a new coach. His name was Bill False. He took notes from Joe, and then he developed his own techniques of training. And yeah, they trained us pretty hard back then. And Bill was a math teacher. And so he has every data point known to man. He was quite good at that and just a real nice man. Eventually, over time, had a state championship team. So he ended up doing quite well.
You started in track in your sophomore year. Did you run cross country?
Yeah. So the next season I ran cross country, and that was my first time. And I still remember the first meet. It was North Hills and Shaler, and I just gutted it out. And we took with Bobby Shirko was first and second. And then I was in third place, and I got leaned out at the tape for third. I ended up getting fourth. We ended up winning the meet anyhow, but it's an automatic win if you take 1, 2, 3. And so I just got leaned out. But my teammates, the older ones, they were like, oh my God, because it's his first cross country meet. And the fact that I ran that hard. So yeah, it was just sheer guts. But I can remember barely seeing the finish line. I was like totally trashed. But I ended up doing pretty well that season and then ran both cross country and track. I like cross country, by the way. I like the interest of it, the different terrains, that type of thing.
Yeah, and they're often Western Pennsylvania, like many places, there's some beautiful courses. Sometimes they're in the woods on grass, all kind of different things. And tactics can play a part. You can disappear around turns and do things. Did you know anything about racing? When did you learn anything about that?
Yeah, I learned about it as I went. Like I said, I always just I was pretty ignorant to a lot of running. I just gave it everything I had. I was one of those runners. But I did have some help with coaches. For instance, I ended up getting the high school record on our cross country course, which was good because Shirko had it. So I was a pretty good guy to break his record. And I remember even that meet, the coach would be yelling at me on one of the hills. And one of the guys that I was up against from Baldwin, he said, take him hard up that hill. You'll recover, kind of thing, and just pump your arms, that type of thing. And then coming along one of the straightaways, he's don't let him get past you. So I didn't. So stuff like that helped. I would say my racing knowledge, I learned when I was in college. Actually, when I was running, I was getting beat a lot, getting out sprinted towards the end because I was giving it everything I had. I was just like, that's all I knew was to give it everything I had. And Doc Raymore, who was the sprint coach, who was a very successful coach, had come from Villanova as a runner. He pulled me aside and he goes, "Okay, Dan, we're going to work on this. When you're coming down the end," he goes, "you have to think relax." He said, "Push, relax, hold your form. Go as hard as you can, but you have to hold your form and you have to relax your body and push." And that was the mantra, is relax and push. And I started winning the races at the end with the help from him. Knowledge of that type of thing, I learned later when I was running at IUP.
Let's review the end of your high school career. What was your best accomplishments in high school, and any other sharp memories, lessons, or anything from that?
Oh, wow. I did well. I was above average. I was usually up in the front in the race. And a lot of the invitationals would be in the top 10. I didn't win any of them, but I would be in that area. At the WPIAL, that's the Western Pennsylvania finals, I didn't have the best race and I came from behind. So I ended up getting 11th, which was a shame because somebody recently, first of all, the time difference between first and 11 was like seconds. And I'm coming from behind, so that's on me. But also the times were all faster than the previous years. So it was quite a competitive field, but I didn't make it to states because I got 11th. But I guess I still ran pretty good. At the time, I didn't know how fast I had run. I just knew I didn't make it. So I was disappointed. But I had the cross country course record. I did not have the 2 mile record. I ran a 9:45 in 2 mile, which was okay. But to be really good, you needed to be like 9:30 or even a little bit better. So I wasn't there. But I was always in it, but I wasn't top guy.
Then, did you run the mile or other events? Sometimes back then, 2 mile, if you ran that, it was one event in the track meet, right?
Yeah. So I did run the mile once and I ran like a 4:30, something like that. I kind of wish maybe I would have trained a little bit more speed to see how I could have done in the mile. I would have liked to see if I could have got that lower, but I was running longer distance.
Yeah. When you started running, apart from track and cross country practice on the roads, did you do that during high school? By the time you got to university, had you noticed the change? Were there casual runners out on the roads with you then yet?
No. Remember, I got to IUP in the fall of 1972.
Yeah.
No, it still wasn't a thing. You were a bit of an oddball out on the roads.
How was your high school academics, and how did you end up at IUP, and what did you think about what's going to happen with you in running?
My academics, I was okay. I was above average in academics. I ended up getting actually a scholarship to Edinburgh, but I really wanted to get into a field where I could get a job. And Edinburgh was more liberal arts. So IUP had an accounting degree, and I saw, I was good in mathematics. So I thought, I'll get a degree in business management, accounting, and that way I'll get a job coming out, because like a lot of people at IUP, a lot of us didn't have much money. They've said it was a working man's college because it was cheap. And I took a loan out to afford to go there. It's nothing compared to what colleges cost like today. But back then, I had to get a loan. I was a above average runner, so I was able to use that to get into IUP and in the business program. So that's what I did. And Ed Fry was the one that obviously I talked to that helped get me into IUP.
I just want to ask you then about the Edinburgh scholarship. What was the scholarship? Athletic?
It was an athletic scholarship in their running program with Doug Watts, really nice man, actually. I ended up continuing to talk with him my 4 years at the university. I liked him. He was a nice person.
Yeah, he's a funny guy, good storyteller.
Yeah.
Likes to go fishing. He might have gone out in his fishing boat if you went there. Yeah. What about meeting Ed Fry? Ed Fry then was, of course, a legendary runner in his own right and a legendary coach. He began the women's teams there later in the 70s. And training, was he running with you? Because by 1975, he had won the World Masters Championship in Toronto in the 10K. I think he even lapped the field. So what was workouts like in 72 and your teammates?
Boy, we trained hard. And yes, Ed, throughout my career at IUP, Ed was on and off on his training. He seemed like he always kept getting hurt and pulling something. So unfortunately, he ran with us some. And boy, he could run workouts. And because he still was a pretty young man, he was in his early 30s at that time. Yeah. And so we ran very hard from the very beginning. And I was telling you, my fastest 2-mile was 9:45. By the spring track season of my freshman year, I could run 9:45 twice with a lap jog in between and intervals workouts. So that's how much I improved just in 1 year, where I could do 2 of them back to back with a lap jog. And then as we got earlier, I could get well below those type of workouts. But those were stomach churners, those workouts.
What was your distance then, the distance change from high school to your freshman year? How much were you on the roads?
We would run, it actually lengthened after my freshman year. When we ran out on the road, we would run about 8 miles. For some reason, it went to 10 miles the next year. But the average that we would run on a slow, we call it slow day. It wasn't that slow nowadays. It was at 7-minute or better mile pace. But we'd run an 8-mile run, and then we would do speed workouts and things like that. Either on the roads, there was a hill we used to work on that was brutal, was out on a country road. And then the track at that time was cinder. Yeah, it wasn't the most beautiful track. I think my high school track was a little nicer.
The track, did they change the surface while you were there? It went to cement.
Yeah, it went to asphalt.
Asphalt.
And it was a shame because so many of us from training on it got shin splints because you're running on asphalt and the shoes weren't great. So you ended up, almost everybody got shin splints because it was just too hard, because they didn't have the money to put the upper coating on. And they never did the whole time I was at IUP. They put that coating on after I graduated.
Your whole career there, had things gone to metric at all by the time you graduated, or you were still doing miles?
It was almost all miles and yards. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Even at nationals, I think it was still like the 880 instead of the 800 and the mile. Now, I ran the steeplechase, so that was 3,000 meter steeplechase. So that one was different.
I got from Ron the records that Dr. Sutton had passed on to him, all the track records, and they didn't run the 2-mile much after you left. So your name's still on the record book as a 2-mile record holder of IUP. Do you remember that race?
Yeah, so that was indoors. So we didn't run the 2-mile outdoors. Those were indoor meets. So yeah, the couple times I would run it per year, usually one down at Pitt and one at Slippery Rock. I think the faster time was in Slippery Rock, and I won that race. But if you've ever run on that track, you would brush your shoulder against the wall going in the inside lane. So I can remember I finished that race and my left shoulder was all scuffed from the brush in the wall as I was running. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. A lot of people say, oh, they don't run it much anymore. They didn't run it much back then either. And we didn't really have a place to train. We were running distance. And if we did any interval work, it was out in the snow and slush out on the highway because the track wasn't plowed or anything. We'd run out there. So it was always a shock to run those 2 miles. It was so much faster than what we had been running. And I remember both races, I'd finish and oh my God, my throat and my insides were just destroyed because we just wasn't used to pushing it that hard on a speed type of race. Yeah, they were interesting races. I
got to admit, looking up at the record board and seeing that 2-mile record and saying, when did we get a chance to go out? And we never got to run it. So it's probably still there 40 years later, maybe 50 years later. Yeah. Someday somebody will say, I want that record. No, they'll
Yeah.
schedule a race.
Just go, yeah, and they'll just go erase it with ease now.
It was a good time, but how did you move to the steeplechase? Was that because of the distance? And did you run the 3 mile?
So I saw the steeplechase and I thought, you know what? I know how to hurdle. And that looked interesting. I have to admit, I found the distance races on the track. It was, I don't hate to say the word monotonous. When you come around that first, lap and they're like 11 to go, it's, oh my God. All right. You're just like pushing like lap after lap. So I like the thought of the steeplechase where you actually had to focus on something else, where you were jumping these things and jumping the water. And so I knew how to do that. So I thought, oh, I'm going to try that, because it seemed like it would be more interesting. And I ended up being pretty good at it. So that's how I moved to it. I think because I probably was better at the close to 2 mile range than 3 miles. And maybe I wasn't fast enough to be 1 mile. I don't know. But I liked that distance better. So that's part of the reason why I got into it. And then I had some success. But even just to tell you a quick story about the steeplechase. So the first time I run it, it was down at West Virginia. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to run the steeplechase. And I didn't know all I knew was this is the race. And okay, I think it's a little over 7 laps, but depending on where the water jump is, could be more or less. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to run this. I get suited up like normal. And about the second lap, I'm thinking, what is dragging on my feet? I wore socks, the old tube socks. Well, I never even thinking you're going through water. So these socks are like dragging on my feet. And I'm like, what is dragging on my feet? And okay, so anyhow, that was the last time I wore socks in the steeplechase. I learned my lesson pretty quickly there, but it was funny.
That's
Like,
great.
why I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to just ask quickly, you had a relationship with Coach Watts from Edinburgh. What competitors do you remember? Who were some of the runners that you recall any?
Oh, wow. I'm trying to think of, so the Edinburgh guys, I knew them somewhat. There was one guy, and was his name Rupp? I'm not sure. It was one of their top runners, but I remember we ran a meet against Edinburgh in the 3 mile, and there was another school too. I don't know who it was, but I just remember, and it was basically me against Edinburgh, because they were basically sprinting me down the straightaways, and then they'd slow down on the turns, and then they'd sprint, and they were taking turns basically doing that to me. And I was just staying with them. And I didn't realize that's what they were doing, but that's what they were doing. They were working as a team, figuring we'll just wear this guy out. But I stayed with them. And then I came around the last turn and I'm winning. I'm beating them, all of them. And this fella, if I remember right, since he got killed by a truck hit him or something later in life. But anyhow, he out-leaned me at the tape and beat me. And I always remembered this because we finished the race and he turns to me, and this is class act. He said, Dan, he said, I crossed the finish line first. He said, but you definitely won that race.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that a sweet, you know what? That's pretty nice. He said, he goes, I just sat behind all that nonsense and just ran consistent pace. And then once they had worn themselves out and me, I guess, then he came and got me in the last 100 yards or so. But I thought that was a class act for him to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. I want to ask you broad overview and take this wherever you want. Picking IUP based on career vision, how did that impact your life, do you think? The times, IUP, Coach Fry and his impact on your personal life and everything else. How did all that change for you? And how did you change over those 4 years at school?
Yeah. The biggest change is Ed Fry introduced me to my wife, who's still my wife. He was her piano professor. I had mentioned to him, I said, I have a lot of girlfriends, but I'm not meeting one that I really and romantically involved with. And he goes, oh, I have just the person. He goes, I like her family. She and you would fit perfectly. I'll introduce you to her. So he did, it's a funny story. And we've been married for 47 years, which is hard to believe. Sometimes you luck out. Probably the best thing that happened to me in my life, which is good to say after 47 years. But in terms of personally, so put that aside for a second, I would say some of the things that Ed instilled in me was the drive, and just, he would always say, train, don't strain, but discount pain was one of his big type of things, which is, he goes, if you just give it that extra bit, yeah, maybe it hurts, but it'll be all worth it because of the success you'll have. And never giving up, like no matter what, you do not give up ever, and you just keep persevering. And I think Ed was one of the best at that, especially with his marathon success, which, yeah, that's a whole nother topic. I thought IUP, what I learned was pretty good. At that age, I wish some of it I would have learned better. Certainly the things like statistics and economics and things like that, I had some great professors, and I really did quite well and retained that knowledge and used it. I ended up getting my MBA at Western Michigan, and so it came in handy for that as well. So that was really good. The one thing in college, I would say, I was training pretty hard. I wanted to be world class. I really did. And so I have no regrets there, because I know I gave it everything I had. My body just couldn't do it. And when I competed against the world class guys, or I shouldn't say competed, but when they were in the same race, I did notice when they would finish a race, they were fine. Like where I needed to be taken out on a stretcher, they would just recover. So I could see the difference in their just metabolism. But as a result of training so hard, I was always tired in college. I was worn out because we didn't know any better. We just said, the harder you train, the better you'll get. That was there wasn't a lot of science to it. And so I thought, okay, I'll just train as hard until I can't even handle it anymore. I'll just go as hard as I possibly can. So that's what I did. Yeah, so I was tired. So it was a little hard to study and things like that in college. But I think the benefits of, like I said, learning to never quit, keep driving, just stay positive, those type of things are things that have stood me well through my life.
Let's talk about the one story that you put a reference to in your book, was the Southern trips. IUP, my freshman year, we took a couple Winnebagos, and you put the javelin throwers and the shot putters and the distance runners all together, and you head off somewhere down south. What was your trip like?
Yeah, we did it in vans, the school vans, and I had to take a course to be one of the drivers of the vans. We drove during spring break. We drove down through Virginia, Virginia Military Institute, and what was the other one? George Washington? We stayed there, and then we went and competed against Bridgestone and Marshall. And then we went down to the Citadel down in South Carolina, and we competed against them. And then we went down all the way down to Miami. Coach Sutton, he had come from Miami to go to IUP, and he had developed their intramural program at Miami. So they liked him, and he had connections down there. So they put us up in their dormitories. But yeah, it was quite a trip. The radio broke about an hour into the trip, so we ended up singing our own songs. And then we realized that Tom McDowell, I think, was one of the guys. For a time, he would ride upside down, and he connected the wires underneath the dashboard that made the radio play, so we'd have some music for a while. It was pretty crazy. We had a trailer on the back of the van that had our luggage in it and everything. So that had its own issues with how to navigate that when you were driving. But it wasn't great for our training, because you're driving so many hours every day, and so you're tired. So then you go to run. It's I can't hardly even. I want to go to bed. I'm so tired. But we still ran okay, and we did good in our meets on the way down. But by the time we got back, we were just in bad shape. And in our first meet, we went straight to Clarion, and the distance runners beat us. And oh, they were so excited and we didn't say anything. But yeah, we were just worn out. We weren't in racing shape. So it took us a little while to get back into shape again.
Yeah, talk about the science of it, and certainly the way people run today, it's much gentler and prepared. But yeah, you have no idea what's going on. You just pop up somewhere. Okay, we're going maybe a workout today, maybe go to the bunk beds, get up in the morning. Yeah, it's all disorienting.
Yeah,
Fun, and you can handle it at that age. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the fun stories, though, is when we go to the Citadel, and it was a beautiful track down in South Carolina. Beautiful, it had trees around it. It was just picturesque. And they put us in their dormitories, which were also very nice. The whole experience, they really treated us good. The day before, whatever, we're out there and their team is there, and they go to me. They said, "Oh, we have the best steeplechaser, on the Eastern Seaboard, and this guy's going to just crush you." And they're going on and on. And I think their intent was to psych me out for the race. But it went the opposite way. I thought, oh, finally, I'm going to get some real competition. I'm just going to stay with this guy. And I'm going to get my best time ever. I was so excited because the best steeplechaser on the Eastern Seaboard. I didn't know. And so I go out in this race and I'm just tearing out. I just go out as hard as I can. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay with this guy. And I'm running. I don't know if I lapped him, but I think I did. And I finished I won by a lot. And I'm like, what? Where's the guy? And they're like, oh, yeah, we just made that up. I'm like, you guys, I was so excited, too, to run against somebody really good. But that was funny.
Yeah. Okay. So then famously, for example, Villanova, Jumbo Elliott would say to a lot of his runners at the end of 4 years, okay, you've done your running. Now go do your life, go have a family, have a career and everything. What was your outlook on running and what you were going to do when you graduated?
Yeah. It's interesting that you said Jumbo Elliott said that because Doc Raymore said the same thing, the sprint coach who trained under Jumbo Elliott at Villanova. And he used to lecture us on there's more to life. It can't be running all the time. You got to get involved in the arts and music and philosophy and stuff like that, so I listened to him. We had good mentors, our coaches. Once I graduated, my goal was, again, like I said, like most of us at IUP, didn't have any money. So I got a job and I started working every day. And so, yeah, I kept running at night when I could, but I was working 8-9 hour days, sometimes more. And so it didn't leave a lot of time for training, and I had to commute to work, that type of thing. But I kept running, but I not competitively really, because I wasn't training anymore. I was working to make a living, but I could still run 10 miles and things like that, which I would do for a while. But I saw probably 2 or 3 years into it, one of my roommates, Kim Burke, he was in law school, but he was training for the marathon, training quite good. And he came up and visited me once I had got transferred up into Ohio. So I was on Lake Erie, and we went out for a run together. And oh my God, I couldn't even stay close to him. So I saw that I had to train to be able to run at the higher speeds. It didn't come naturally to me. I had to train hard and run intervals and that type of thing. But yeah, it was amazing how much, I couldn't even come close to the speed that he was running. But I kept running, and I have run consistently since 70. So I've been running 1970. So I've been running for 55 years? Now, not fanatical, but I have not taken off that much, only maybe for a little injury here and there, but not like long, not like more than weeks or a month the most. I've pretty much run, and I still, like this week, I'll run probably 3 times this week, 4 miles each. I do other things. I do swimming, and I walk with my wife, and we bike and we kayak. We do all kinds of different things, golf. We walk when we golf. I still can run, and like you, the knees are holding up and the hips are holding up. So I guess at least structurally, I'm okay.
That run with Kim Burke and realization and your priorities in the discussions with Raymore and your vision of what was going to be with life. How did you handle the competition loss? Competition is part of it, even if it's not to win, just to compete is often a driving force. How was competition in your mind and psyche, and what happens when that goes away?
So two things. One, with running, what I missed most when I left university wasn't the competition. It was the people and the camaraderie, the pack running. Loved that. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed that pack mentality of running. It was a lot of fun. I would say that's what I missed the most. The competition, I realized that I wasn't world class. So yeah, I ran some good races, but in the big scheme of things, who cares? I think I benefited personally from learning from it and having courage and drive. That's all great, but the times were not there. They weren't great. As for competition, I probably transferred it to my work and drove it there, but not outwardly. It was inward competition, which is, I think, what I learned from running too, is that it's not a bragging competition. It's not, oh, I'm going to get them. It's inside you. It's like, all right, I'm going to give it everything I have and go as hard as I can and do it that way, quiet competition. So in work, that's probably what I did. And yeah, so I think I drove it there.
You can give us an assessment, but you had a very successful business career and rose to executive level, managing people from chatting. And we don't know each other that well. You're almost sickeningly balanced and a healthy individual. And it's great to talk to you because you're humble and your introspection and perspective on all this is great to hear. What about your career and traveling overseas? How did that open up your eyes and change you over those next decades?
Yeah, I was fortunate to have a good career, moved quite a bit to do it. I worked a lot for consumer products companies. So the Kellogg Company, H.J. Heinz, a company called Fort James, which became Georgia Pacific, Nestle Waters, and Nestle Global. So a lot of consumer products companies. And I worked my way up through them and got some breaks here and there, which really helped my career, which, as we know, nobody ever does it alone. Somebody always helps you somewhere. So I can point to people who helped me through my career, gave me a break that helped catapult me further. My roots are Western Pennsylvania and not well off. So I had never really done any international travel. I just didn't have the money for it back then. And I had a family and all your money goes there. But then I got this job as the general manager of worldwide infant feeding. And I talked to my wife about it and I said, really want to do this. Can you put up with this? It's like a 2-year job. And I ended up traveling the world for 2 years. And I have to say that really changed my perspectives on work and life in general, because as I traveled all around the world, and when I say all around the world, literally, I was in Asia, Europe, South America, was the Eastern Bloc, some of those countries, because the wall had just come down. So I was doing work over there. So I traveled quite a bit. The people I was meeting from all over the world, you'd have dinner at night, and I would hear them talk about the arts and philosophy and history and science. And I thought to myself, okay, I have an MBA and I know a lot about business, but man, I'm deficient when it comes to all these other things. And these one guys I was talking to from Germany, and they knew more about American Indians than I ever knew. So I'm thinking, wow, they don't even live in North America and they know more about it than I do. I wanted to compete. Again, maybe that's the competitiveness, but I'm like, you know what? I need to catch up. So I just started reading like crazy. And it really opened my eyes to one, being more tolerant, being more open-minded, being more aware of the world, not just Western, but also Eastern cultures, which we didn't get a lot of in school, didn't even exist in a lot of cases. And that helped a lot, which led to one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because as I was reading all these things that my eyes opened to, wait a minute, a lot of this stuff I was told that was real, that this is imaginary. I'm reading the history of this, where these different things came. Then it led to me writing a book about it. I'm like, you know what, I want to share all this knowledge that I got with other people. And I made a lot of friends around the world. And one of the things I learned is it's not right or wrong, the different cultures. It's just, in many cases, just different. There's many ways to do something a different way. And when you look at those differences, sometimes they're better, sometimes maybe they're worse, but it's certainly interesting to see how they do it. And I think it makes life more interesting. And I wish more people would have the opportunity that I had to see all those things, because it does make life more fulfilling.
I always think of it as it makes life richer, because just metaphorically, colors, flavors, everything that come from different people. Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
A nice way to reflect on it.
Thing I want to say, getting to the running, almost in all these places I would go for runs if I could, if it was safe. And so I ran in places like Myanmar, Yangon, Myanmar, which probably in hindsight was not real smart. Okay. In fact, yeah. But I can remember running down the road, and I think I'm the only white face. And these guys are standing there with their machine guns or whatever they had. But on the way back, they're cheering me on, running. And the people in these, like hanging off of these buses and stuff, they're like cheering for me, running back to the hotel. I kept the running going even in places like that. Like I said, in that case, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but it certainly was a fun memory, actually.
That's brilliant. Yeah. I have an embarrassing story I won't tell. Maybe I'll tell you. Running down the middle of the green zone in Baghdad at midnight was, I can relate to, why am I doing this? And am I going to end up on the newspaper? This is not a good idea. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Can I ask you to tell that story about your Aeroflot flight from Helsinki? And then I want to go back to talk about some more about relationships, and then we'll get to your book.
Yeah.
Story.
Yeah. So this was like I'm trying to think, it was in the mid 90s. So the wall had just come down, and I was actually starting a baby food business. We had an infant formula factory in the Czech Republic. We had a jarred baby food in Hungary. And then we were building a cereal factory in Stavropol, Russia. I was trying to put these things together to make them into one business. So that's why I was going over into the Russia area. And in this case, we talked about Estonia. One of the flights I took, it was an Aeroflot flight. And I go to get on the plane, and I asked them in English, I said, do I have a seat? And they said, oh, Americana. And they write down a number, and I forget what seat it was, but it was like B5 or something, whatever. They give me this piece of paper just written with B5. I'm like, okay. So I get up and I go to get on the plane, and somebody was sitting there, and the steward pushes them out of their seat, and they put me in the seat, because I don't think anybody had. I think you just sat wherever you were. But anyhow, I don't know this. And so I'm sitting there. I'm like, okay, I hope this plane takes off okay and all is good. We take off, and we're up in the sky, and the steward comes out with this bottle of Coke and these little plastic cups and starts pouring everybody like a little bit of Coke. And these guys that were from Great Britain are beside me, and they go, oh, they said, there must be an American on the plane, because we don't usually get the Coke. And I sitting there, and I turned to them and I said, I'm an American. They're like, oh, thanks. You're the reason why we're getting the Coke on the plane. I said, they don't usually do that. And they're like, no, they're trying to impress you that Russia, we're as good as the United States. So we got the same stuff as you do on your flights. And I'm like, wow, that's funny. So they said, yeah, thanks for the Coke. So they were thanking me. So that was a funny experience on Aeroflot.
Yeah, it's interesting. You've done a great job of memories and telling these stories, and a little bit of ambassadorship there, if you know it or not, and winning over some of the armed people in Myanmar. Those are great stories. I want to talk one last thing before we talk about your book, and that's with some of the people that have gone on. And of course, Coach Fry is gone now. were you able to stay in touch with him? We all have to handle those people in our lives passing on, but Coach Fry was a big figure to a lot of people, and it was quite a big deal to the whole community when he passed.
Yeah, it was really sad. And yes, I did stay in touch with him. At a minimum, we would write to each other at least once a year or twice. And if I would get to Indiana, because my wife was from Indiana, I would always go and visit him. So him and Betsy. So yeah, I did stay in touch with him. Yeah, it was sad. I saw him towards the end when he had dementia, and I felt bad for that. We went out to lunch and he was having trouble even navigating the money, and he wanted to pay, and I'm like, Ed, I got this. And he would not allow it. I'm like, okay. But it was at least I got to see him towards the end. He was very upset about moving out of Indiana to Somerset. He just didn't understand it. That was sad. But throughout the years, yeah, we stayed in touch and always laughed about a lot of our old stories and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, the community, the people that are still around that part occasionally and returning for Hall of Fame inductions and things. People still get together and the same stories get retold and retold for decades. Yeah. Let's talk about this process of writing your book. You mentioned it a little bit. It was your longer perspective with more global interacting with people and cultures and challenging what we all learned as kids and your view on that. This is a philosophical book, and you're a businessman. How does this fit in with Dan Friedrich? This book is, if people who find this, they say, Dan wrote this? Or what is it?
The book is called They Told Us to Just Believe. And it basically takes a critical thinking approach to the origins of our beliefs and asks the question, are they real? It involves a lot of research. It's fairly pragmatic book because it really just goes after where did these things actually come from and why. And you say, why would Dan write this? One of the things I would say in business that I was best at was critical thinking. I was the guy in the company that was asking a lot of the questions and why are we doing this? How about why did we try this? To try to get to the best thing, always focused on how to drive the business forward. And it's interesting because even when I left the one company, a lot of the people said there's nobody in the company doing that anymore. And I would do it in auditoriums. I'm like, wait a minute, and I'd ask the questions. And they said, nobody's challenging things to get to a better place. So I was pretty good at it. And so I thought, why not use that with these beliefs? Because I had done all this research and read all these things. And I basically came to the conclusion from it all that, and this is the point of the book, there are things that we don't know. They're unknowable. And what I disagree with is people coming out and saying, I know. If you believe this will happen. No, you don't. It's unknowable. You can believe that. So in my book, it doesn't preach. You believe what you want as long as it doesn't hurt someone else and is kind and compassionate and tolerant. But don't say you know, because you don't. It's unknowable. I think once you get there, and that's true with a lot of things, you can have a better conversation because then the conversation doesn't become emotional. It becomes, here's what I think and here's my logic behind it. And you can learn from each other, which is good. So that's one of the reasons for the book. The other is to be more open-minded, that you always think that yours is the best. It's okay, let's think about this. So yet you were born in wherever, and so you're Christian or you're Catholic or you're whatever, and you're like, oh, that's the best. I'm like, what if you got born in India? Then Hinduism would be the best. What if you got born in the Middle East somewhere? Then you'd say Islam is the best. What if you got born in Israel, or Judaism's the best, or Buddhism's the best? It's all dependent on where you were born and who your parents were, really. And how is that? It's pretty random if you think about it. But we were taught, no, you got to believe this, and it worked pretty good because the threat of damnation was strong. You don't believe this, you're going to hell. It's okay. Where did that idea come from? The hell idea, because that's made up too. You don't know. Now, it might make people feel good. People you don't like that were mean to you, you're like, yeah, you're going to hell. So I guess there's that, right? We don't know that. That's unknowable. You might hope that's true for some people, but that were cruel, but we don't know. So that's really what the book entails. And so I'm hoping that people that read it, they become more tolerant, a little more open-minded, kinder to one another, and then understand that there's unknowable things about where we came from and what's happening to us when we die. It's unknowable. You can believe what you want. So that's really the gist of the book. I've had people that have read it that said it gave them a lot of peace to believe what they want to believe, because it got rid of all the superstition and the mythology, and it took that all away. It's okay. Now I can believe what my true belief is, whatever that would be. And I think there's a need for that, for people to have some belief like that. I think that's important. And I think if I was to write another book, it would go in the line of more, what are the morals and ethics and how we should treat each other type of book, pulling from everything. We don't need to go back 2,000 years to get stuff. Yes, there's some good things that people said 2,000 years ago. There's pieces of it the Greek philosophers said, but then there's also so many current day philosophers, and not even now, as well as like the 1700s. I have a chapter on, does God really bless America? Even those type of guys. But we've learned even from them, because of science and things like that, of how we should treat one another. Even the current day, like the Dalai Lama has a really nice book about how we should treat one another and live without any Buddhism influence. So I think that's needed in society. There needs to be something to take their place, because there is a void and a need for teaching people morality, ethics, and how to treat one another and how to live your life in a positive way.
This is the kind of book that maybe seems a bit timeless. There's always going to be a good idea to do critical thinking, and it's not a pop book. It is something that you're passionate about, but you come across very genuine and not fanatical. It's really good. And this is the kind of thing, personally, I think we would do well to have even more people who are thinking the way you are, to genuinely and gently nudge people to be kind. What a great message. All right. Any last thoughts about your reflection on the 1970s and running and what it was to be a part of that?
The good news is it got people running and working out. I've been doing it my whole life, and it's really been a benefit to me. It also, just in general, makes me feel better. My doctors actually told me to back off on the running some. And I said, I feel better. Everything works better when I run. So I said, as long as it's not hurting, I said, I want to keep running at least some. And they said, okay. They said, that's fine. Mix it up, because I don't get the benefit of other exercise like the running does. So that's been really good. I think it's so much fun to see all the people out there running. And I know when I've ran some of the road races with tens of thousands of people, I look around and I think, wow, these people, the human spirit is amazing. These people aren't going to quit. They're going to go the whole distance. And it actually makes you feel pretty good about other human beings and running with them and seeing them do it. So I never would have thought it would have got as popular as it did, especially like you said, how we were treated when we first started out as these weirdos running. Like, why are they doing that? So from that standpoint, the 70s, it was a turning point. You're right. And I think it has led to a lot of good things. All the turkey trots, and how fun for people to come together, do this. And no matter how fast you run, because it doesn't matter. Just if you get out there and do it and you get done, you feel good about yourself and you feel good about being part of a group.
Yeah. And it's exactly as you say, in those situations, people aren't thinking how different we are. They're thinking about how much we have in common.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Dan, for all your time. Good luck. I hope you're doing this with your book. You're also bookable as a speaker. So this idea, I think it's great that you have the passion that you just think this is good for everybody and you want everybody to at least consider it. That's good for you.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. It was so nice spending some time with you again.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.